Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. I'm super excited today to be talking about all things automation, AI. Truth of the matter is, our industry is being disrupted every day. My guest today, Laura, is from Cartwheel. Laura, welcome.
Thank you, Suki. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Before we dive in, tell people who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Laura Boivin. I work with Cartwheel. We do accounts receivable automation. I personally have a background in technology, so I'm a computer scientist. Prior to working at Cartwheel, I worked in AI education, and then I worked in cybersecurity using AI, and now I'm working in automation. So that's
you don't come
a little
from the
bit about
staffing
me.
industry, right?
No, I don't. But I have to say, I absolutely love serving the staffing industry. Such amazing people, such hard workers, and such incredible business-minded people. I love it.
This industry is hard. So look, I'm going to dive straight in. Let's just demystify accounts receivable automation, right?
Okay.
Automation can seem really overwhelming for some agencies, and especially if you're a smaller agency. Can you break down what accounts receivable automation really means for the staffing industry, and why is it a game changer?
Absolutely. So before even touching on the accounts receivable part, I'd love to explain a little bit about automation and what that is, because it's not self-explanatory. It's the term itself. We hear it a lot, but we don't often receive an explanation as to what that looks like. So automation, the term itself, was coined in 1946 in the automobile industry. And, that was when essentially what automation is the use of technology to perform tasks with minimal human intervention. So where automation fits in really well in businesses is in places where people are repeatedly doing tasks that are manual and that don't necessarily require a human to be thinking or reasoning in order to complete those tasks, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Actually, that's a really good explanation, right? So what is Cartwheel? I mean, yes, it's the receivables, but, I'm a staffing agency owner listening to this, and I say, I have 10 people in my accounts department, and 3 of them deal with receivables. Why do I need to automate that?
Yeah. So what you'll notice is in that accounts receivable team, you have a bunch of super smart people capable of doing amazing things. However, a lot of the time what I'm seeing is, especially in larger staffing companies, but as well as in smaller staffing companies, is that you'll see that people are performing these repetitive, mundane, tedious tasks. So for example, they're getting data from one software system, let's say your payroll software system, you're getting the time from there, and then you're entering it into another system to create an invoice. And you have to remember all of your rules, your exceptions, things like that. You have to apply them. You have to apply different rates. And then you have to then copy that information again into another system a lot of the time and compare, and constantly. It can take a long time to create one invoice. So imagine creating 10 invoices, 50 invoices, 500 invoices per week. It's completely overwhelming. So what Cartwheel does is it takes all of those repetitive tasks that people are required to perform, and that people often, unfortunately, are performing so many of these tasks that they're making mistakes and things like that. And we just automate it. So we take all of the rules, all of the business processes that people are currently required to do, unique business processes, because each staffing industry, agency within the staffing industry is different. And then we mirror exactly what the humans are doing, but we have technology complete those tasks automatically.
Amazing.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Question going through my mind, and you and I talked about this last week, I think it was. People use the word automation, AI interchangeably, and they're not one of the same. So I guess maybe that should have been my very first question, but now it's my second question. Can you tell people the difference? Because yeah, you see it get used into everybody's like, oh yeah, we've got AI, we've got AI. And then when I actually talk to them, it's like, no, you've got automation. We haven't necessarily got AI, or the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI is actually a form of computer science. It's used to create intelligent machines that can perform very specific tasks. So they can learn, reason, and self-correct. So that's kind of what AI is. Versus automation, it's not learning, it's not reasoning, it's not self-correcting. We're setting it up and it's automating flows that are predetermined. Whereas
Okay.
AI has this flexibility about it.
So if I've understood, you're talking to somebody that is so not techie at all, but pretty much what we're saying is the automation is always going to do the same thing over and over and over again until you go in and change the rules, right?
Yes,
Whereas
absolutely.
AI is going to be learning and almost adapting without somebody having to physically go in there and say, hey, can you adapt now?
You absolutely got it.
There you
You
go.
completely, you understand AI. There you go. Yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It is. It's because I hear it bandied around so much, right? And everybody talks about, yes, we're using technology, we're using AI and da 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 da. I get that for your marketing and stuff like that. But if you are automating, and we're talking accounts receivables here, that's not that's an automation. That is taking your process and maybe improving on it, because not all the process is the right process, and then just letting the system do it. That then frees up your people to do other things.
Yes, absolutely. And it also, as you scale, stops you from needing to necessarily hire more staff to do these manual tasks. So
Yeah.
it really frees up your people. It gives them the opportunity to use their mind to, help your business grow as
Yep.
opposed to being bogged down by doing tasks that really don't require a high level of human intelligence, right? So,
Yeah.
of course, if math it requires intelligence, but we have calculators,
Yeah.
so we don't necessarily, we have spreadsheets, we have things like that. When it comes down to just taking data, manually inputting it into a spreadsheet, or creating an invoice manually, or sending out reminders manually, or collecting payments and figuring out reconciliation manually, all of these things can be automated.
Yeah. And no disrespect to people that love that space doing that, Matt, but how mundane and repetitive. And I'm just thinking, this is why I'm not in accounts, but I'm just thinking, when you're inputting that much data, it becomes repetitive and errors happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
If you're doing it
absolutely.
all the time, like we're humans, right? Mistakes happen, but all
Mm-hmm.
it takes is one invoice being sent out incorrectly.
Yes.
Or the time, actually, back up a second, the timesheet being incorrect in the first place, so where the data's starting, the whole thing's a mess then. And ultimately, in our industry, especially if you're contracting, right, you've got to get that cash in fast.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing, right? Spending hours and hours per week generating invoices manually, sending them out, sending out reminders, follow-ups. And you're sending out so many invoices that all have their terms, right?
Yep.
So people are not paying as soon as they receive an invoice. So just keeping track of all of that and making sure that you are in fact collecting money and the client has in fact access to their invoice or access to a list of invoices easily that you've sent to them, so important.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's that ROI of really ensuring that you're getting paid faster and accurately. That's where it's important.
Yeah. Faster and accurately, right? I'm just thinking a lot of Canadian companies, okay, are looking at doing cross border. They want to do the US, or even international. And for that matter, US staffing agencies coming into Canada. So I guess it really doesn't matter. It's just cross border. I should imagine, again, just taking what you were just saying, the manual labor. Now you're throwing in different currencies.
Yeah.
right? Now you're throwing in different currencies, and just the thought of it makes my head spin, right? How easy is it with automation? How easy is it with automation to automate that?
Currency is very easy to automate because it's a clearly defined rule. It is what it is, and it's that simple. So a computer program can absolutely do that much quicker than a human can, because we have so many things going on in our mind. If we only had to focus on specific tasks every day that were, clearly defined, and then we can just output them, that would be, very simple. But our minds are constantly running. We have all sorts of responsibilities. We go through things. We get sick. We need to take time off of work sometimes. We need to take a break. We burn out. So automation is just kind of always there for you, doing exactly what you expect it to do, exactly the way that you wanted it set up for you.
I want to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, staffing agencies that have 100 temps out, 1,000 temps out, contractors, whatever it is, right? When you're talking to these staffing agencies, do they actually realize how much money they are losing by having all of this still very manual? It's not having it automated, right? So literally, and I'm not necessarily talking cost of your accounts team, your accounts receivable people, right? I'm talking the other costs of delayed invoices, cost of raising cash. Do people actually, staffing agencies actually realize the amount of money they're losing?
So one thing that I've noticed about staffing agencies is it really depends on who you speak with within the company. I think that staffing agencies are very, very much focused on acquiring new customers, very, very focused on selling, which is extremely important, revenue generation. I've noticed, sometimes the accounts receivable side of it kind of falls on the back burner because that's kind of the back office. That's maybe perhaps other people that are responsible for that. They seem to be doing an okay job, but yes, and they are, of course, they're doing the absolute best that they can, highly intelligent people. But it takes really looking into it. Like, are we meeting our terms? Are we getting paid as fast as possible? How many mistakes have been made, and how many of those mistakes are actually reported? That's another part of it, right? So it's difficult to tell, but I would say that yes, the majority of staffing agencies definitely feel the pain, and they definitely do want to get paid faster. There's no doubt. They need that money in the bank. It's just a question of how do we get paid faster, and what does that look like?
It's because there's a huge pressure on margins in the first place, right? And cost of borrowing, depending where you're borrowing from, is crazy high. And you're right, because as you were talking, I was thinking the amount of time it takes. Let's say there's an invoice error. Accounts come to, and I'm simplifying it, the branch manager, and says, hey, company ABC are not paying this invoice because they say it's incorrect. He or she then has to go to, I don't know, the recruiter whose candidate it was and say, this invoice was incorrect. They have to then go and dig in, reach the candidate, or do whatever they have to do. Even if that whole process takes 2 hours, I'm sure it takes longer, but let's just say it takes 2 hours, right? That is 2 hours where that recruiter has not been filling orders, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we truly look at that cost. And then the relationship with the client, because especially I know, talking to so many recruiters around the world, they hate it, absolutely hate it when they have to get involved with anything to do with collecting cash, invoice errors. Right? They don't want to be having that conversation with their client because it's not their job, let's be honest. Their job is to create revenue. Okay. And especially when it's a mistake made on the staffing agencies end. So I guess what I'm saying is, anybody listening to this, have you actually sat back and thought about the trail of when you last had an invoicing issue and the amount of man hours that were lost?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then multiply that by the number of invoices that you're creating, So not all of them will have errors, but there's a percentage of them that inevitably will. It's not, it's just impossible to do everything perfectly when there's an extensive amount of manual processes required. Oh,
I've heard of
sorry.
companies now saying, you know what, our terms, we're not paying for 60 days, right? So that is some of the terms that are being agreed. I disagree, especially if you're in contracting, but 45, even 45 days is a long time to wait for your cash. That's assuming there's no errors. That's
Yes.
assuming there's no backwards and forth happening, right? It's really interesting because their problems, it doesn't matter where you are based. You could be based in Australia, Timbuktu, Canada, wherever. The cost is the same. The lost revenue and opportunity cost there. And that's before we start talking about the client looking at it and saying, can't you get this right?
Absolutely. And I mean, it goes both ways, right? Even for a client, I've heard staffing agencies report that they had a client who wasn't paying them, and then,
Mm-hmm.
they continued sending workers over, and they just didn't figure out that their client hadn't been paying within terms quickly enough, especially when you have a large volume of clients to keep track of.
Yeah.
Or,
And
the client says, "Oh, I don't know where my invoice is. I never received it."
yeah,
It's
because
very important.
clients accounts department's job is to keep their cash in their bank as long as
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
Staffing agencies accounts job is to get the cash out of the client's bank into their bank as soon as possible, right? Are you seeing, I love the fact that you don't come from staffing, so this has all been, for lack of a better word, new to you, understanding the industry. Are you seeing, and I'm not just talking receivables automation, but in general, are you seeing companies adopting technology and actually using it the way it's designed religiously? Or are you seeing people have got all their tech stacks, but they're still going, they're not using it to full effect?
I love that question because staffing companies are so kind of almost pressured nowadays to adopt technology. And what I've seen happens a lot is that they do adopt technology. They adopt the technology that their peers are using, that they've, the popular names and, all of that. However, it's so important to get the full extent of education on what that tool provides and where its limitations are and what tools you may want to use to fill in those gaps. So, to answer your question, I think that there are quite a few, staffing companies that are very tech savvy, that fully understand their tech stack and they're using their tech stack to the fullest degree. But I've also seen a lot of situations where, they have their tech stack and they're not fully aware of all the features that are available in their technology. They haven't been, during the sales process of them purchasing a product. It's not their fault, but perhaps they haven't been provided with all of the information required for them to be able to either fully use the technology as it's supposed to be used or pick the right technology to solve their specific problem.
I agree with all that. I was just thinking back to, I think it was this year's summit, the Canadian Staffing Summit this year. And the CEO panel, we were talking about that. And if I remember correctly, don't quote me, but the four CEOs on the panel all said something like 50-60% of the tech stack that they've purchased and they were told they needed in the business is being used. That's it. So that's still 40-50 odd percent. Half of it, let's keep it really simple, a waste of money not being used.
Yeah, I think that it's really important for people when they're beginning the process of purchasing a tech tool that they really dive in with a lot of questions and that they have a full understanding of what this product can do and that they ensure that it be explained to them in a way that they're able to understand, because that's the most important part. And if there's a question that, the sales representative is not able to answer because perhaps they're not, their personal background is not technical enough, invite them to bring in a technical person from their team to explain it to you in layman terms, because everything should be made simple, for customers. Customers should fully understand what they're committing to when they're spending their money. It's so important.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, from the staffing agency's perspective, a lot of these people making these decisions don't actually understand what happens on the front line on a day to day basis. Yes, they have their process chart. We all know in staffing, that's not how it works, right? We're dealing with people. So I often wonder why staffing agencies don't bring in the people that are actually doing the job to be part of the decision making process. And I get it. You're If it's a recruiter, you're pulling somebody off selling and placing and generating revenue to do in the short term non-revenue generating stuff. So that often that surprises me in your world, particularly in receivables. Do you find that the decision is made by the CFO finance guys, or are they made by the business owners, and then the kind of like accounts are told to use you?
Yeah, I would say it's about 50-50. I would
Okay.
say oftentimes we see, a CFO who understands the concept, appreciates the technology, and then they'll kind of empower their team by bringing them into a call and having them participate in the discussion and really kind of break down what it is that their process is so that it can be automated. And then other times we do have the business owner who comes in, says, I love what I'm seeing, and then, wants to move forward ahead of involving their team, which, I mean, I think either way works well, as long as the person who's making the decision fully understands the decision that they're making, so they have all of the information to empower them to make the right decision for their company, ensure that they have an ROI on the technology tool that they're implementing.
Okay, now I get that. So automation is supposed to get rid of all the jobs, and what was it? The stats that at Staffing World they were sharing, right? There were some crazy stats they were sharing about automation. One of the things I remember from that and taken away, if I had $30,000, I can have a robot cleaning the house right now, right? And there's a lot of fear with people around adopting technology because, well, if a robot can do my job, I won't have a job. Do you find a lot of resistance and pushback from the people whose job is being automated?
So I would say that we still need people. We absolutely still need people to do work. And the goal of automation, I don't think that it's to take away people's jobs from them completely. I
Hmm.
mean, I would say that in your accounting team, you're hiring people because they have a background in accounting and they are extremely knowledgeable in their field. And there's a lot that goes into accounting that is overlooked because of all of these manual tasks that they're performing. They're not just invoice creators and invoice senders and follow-uppers, they're fantastic people to have on your side for strategy, for thinking, for kind of helping you scale your business. I mean, what better person than a finance person to help you with that as a business owner? So I would say that, yes, I think that the fear, I believe, comes in people don't want to hand off very important work to a technology company for
Okay.
fear that that work will not be done correctly or as well as they can perform it. That's why it's so important to have those smart people in your company involved in the
Ah,
process.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So imagine, we have sales for revenue generation, but revenue generation really comes from getting that money into the bank, so that is accounts receivable. And I can totally understand where somebody in the accounts receivable department would say, oh, no, 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 this job is so important. I don't think a technology company should be doing this job. And I agree, a technology company should not be doing the entire job of, the accounts receivable team, but it absolutely can do the job, the pieces of the job that don't require that strategic thinking, the pieces of the job that are all about double right, triple right processes, inputting information from one system to another. Because what Cartwheel does is it actually integrates with all of your systems. So rather than go into your payroll system and gather information from there, put it in an Excel sheet or create, an invoice, that can be done automatically, from one system to another system, automate the process with rules and, send out that invoice. So those types of tasks can be done.
Yeah, because as you were talking, my mind, in my simple mind, I was like, okay, so all of that's automated now. We're never going to eliminate human error because if somebody has filled out their timesheet incorrectly, if somebody has put that, so you know what, we can reduce it, but so as you were talking, in my mind, I had the picture being painted, your technology speaking to all their different data points and automating all of that. Well, that frees up, as you said, the accounts team to be involved in the strategy, in the other stuff. Because what you're doing is you're actually setting your business up for success to be able to scale, okay? Because accounts right now are maxed out. The cash, actually, forget that. Let's talk about cash coming into the bank. I want to grow my business, but you know what? My receivables, they're crazy high. It's taken 60, 70 days. I'm just like too scared to take on that client because I don't have the finance for it anymore because it's all tied up here. So what we're in essence, I know we're talking about finance automation in particular here, receivables automation, but the truth is it can apply to any automation because once you release that bottleneck, that pressure valve, it allows your business to grow. But you have to sit in that pain and understand what that pain is to be able to automate it is in essence what we're saying here, right?
Yeah, and I would say that, you don't know what you don't know.
Uh-huh.
So I would definitely encourage people, if they go to trade shows, if they go to conferences, the Canadian Staffing Summit, for example,
Yep.
to speak with those technology vendors and to find out more about what's out there, about what pain points can be solved. Because, what's a pain point for you may not be at the top of your priority list, but there's a solution, So in order to know what that solution could look like, it's important to kind of, go around and see what's coming out and, take the discovery call, even if you're not necessarily in the market today. But, take a discovery call, 30 minutes, talk about it, learn, keep up to date in what's available out there.
Well,
Definitely encourage that.
yeah, it's almost as you saying that, I was thinking, well, it's like having a pain in your arm. It's not really too bad. You notice it and you just learn to live with it, right? And until somebody says to you, hey, here's a pill or here's an exercise that's going to get rid of that, right? So, and that's almost that discovery call scenario going on there, because if you don't know there is a solution, you just think this is how it's meant to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And nowadays it's so easy to fall behind. I mean, technology is just, there's so many new companies coming out who have better and better and better, faster, stronger solutions, So it's an amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, it
Very
is.
interesting.
Our industry is just evolving so fast, right? So let's come back to, so you were at the Canadian Staffing Summit 2024 and you're back 2025. Was that your first staffing summit of any description anywhere?
That was my first staffing summit in Canada.
Okay.
And that was really great. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say that when I came in, everyone's friends. That's what I was told. I needed to go on stage for a little bit, and I was a little nervous because I get a little shy sometimes. But everyone there was like, "Hey, listen, Laura, we're all friends here. You're welcome within." It's such a nice environment.
That's amazing, and thank you for saying, because the truth of the matter is, this industry is people, right? So if you're not warm and fuzzy yourself, your clients pick that up anyhow, right? So I'm glad you found that summit welcoming. But what were some of the things that you learned about staffing agencies there that you didn't necessarily know? And to be honest, I haven't got anything in mind in particular, or, whether about industrial or tech, just generally, what was a misconception you had about staffing agencies, I guess, before you attended that summit?
Oh, that is such a good question. I really came in kind of like an open book. I was open to learning about the industry as much as I always am. The industry, as you said, is such evolving so quickly. And, it's so interesting. There's so many different areas. I would say that one thing that I didn't necessarily realize was how many different types of industries exist in the world. Like, wow, there's people who staff farmers, there's people who staff, C-suite, there's people who staff, light industrial. I knew these things, but it's just all the specific, niche corners of staffing, and also the variety of how each staffing agency functions. They're all so unique and so different, especially, so I'm coming from an accounts receivable side. They're all different. One size fits all solution is just not possible today. And I was amazed also with how much people want to learn. People are so interested, and they're such amazing business people, and they have such a growth mindset. So I love the staffing industry. I think it's fantastic. Everyone's worked really hard to get to where they are.
Yeah, it is. It's not an easy industry, right? On paper, it's really easy. Client needs a job filled. Candidate can fill that job and they're looking for a job. Why wouldn't it be a match made in heaven, right? But that's just not the case. As you were talking about the different niche, recruitment niches, I actually didn't know until a couple of years ago. There's an agency in the US, and all they do is supply priests and pastors to churches, right?
I love that. That's so unique, right?
It is, right? I was just like, and then it makes sense. When you think about it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But it's not something you would think about. There's another agency out of the US. I want to say the agency is called Second Chance. I could be wrong. And all they do is work with individuals once they come out of prison, giving them a second chance, get their life back on track, right?
So valuable.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many different niches that like I said, those were two that I was like, wow, but it makes sense, right? So,
absolutely.
Okay, so you're going to be at the summit April 2025 as well. So anybody listening to this who wants to get in touch with you or wants to meet you at the summit, what's the best way that they can reach out to you and learn more?
You can reach out to me through email, through LinkedIn, in person, give me a call. I am more than happy to talk anything accounts receivable automation, but not only that, let's talk technology, let's talk AI, automation, whatever is out there. I love having these conversations with people.
Amazing. So I'm going to make sure your details are in the show notes for this. Laura, we could go on forever, but any final passing thoughts, comments?
The staffing industry, everyone I've met so far, they're all on the right track. They're all interested in learning, and that's what it's all about. And, I would just say, continue, keep it up, speak to some technology vendors, and stay up to date in what's available out there.
Laura, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate this, and I will see you at the summit.
I'll see you at the summit. I can't wait.
Take care.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.